cat in the wall, eh? Okay, now you're talking my language.
You ever drunk Baileys from a shoe?
Oh, great. Thanks, Mother, for replacing the baby aspirin with LSD.
How much you want to make a bet I can throw a football over the mountain?
All right, welcome into a special episode of The View from C-Deck. It's me, just Matt, with the Direwolf, and the CFP rankings have just come out. We got some instant reactions to the very first rankings of the year. As always, the committee does some weird things. It's like they try to make it different from all the other polls. Especially, I'm not that I'm a huge fan of the AP poll. I'm not really a fan of any polls a lot of times, but this is another strange one. And Tennessee is number one. Our Buckeyes are number two in the initial rankings. But I think the headline of the night is where LSU is, because relative to their other poll placement, they are really high. The highest two-loss team by far. They're ahead of a lot of one-loss teams. And clearly they're getting a mulligan for the Florida State loss, I would say, and not getting punished much for getting their ass whipped at home by Tennessee. But Tennessee's number one, and that could be it's all the circular logic of the committee. They're that high because they lost to number one. Well, they're number one because you made them number one.
Yeah, exactly. That it's so annoying, and I think they're getting a lot of credit for that Ole Miss win too.
Yeah,
like a ton of credit. But in our previous podcast, I had mentioned you and Jason both thought it'd be Georgia, Tennessee, and Ohio State, which was definitely pretty likely.
Yeah.
I thought we 100% deserve to be ahead of Tennessee because we're more of a complete team with their trash defense. So I wouldn't have been shocked if it was Georgia, us, Tennessee. And then they go off the hinges and put Tennessee one against both us and Georgia, who are clearly more complete teams. They beat the darling Bama, and that apparently trumps all.
Us being ahead of Georgia, I think, makes the least sense in all this. And there's all kind none of it makes sense in the top three. We were all totally wrong on that, I think. Yeah. And it's obviously different than both polls. The Tennessee, I guess if one thing we know about this damn committee, if we've learned one thing, and only one thing over the years, is they freaking love Alabama. So the fact that they beat Alabama, that's just about Alabama's there. And the other one that surprised me from the committee, now they're in both the polls, it's the same in all the polls, are Bama 6, TCU 7. To me, that's a bunch of crap. Bama has a loss. They have a lot of close wins against the same type of teams that TCU's been beaten, except for TCU's beaten more of them and they haven't lost yet. And the only real, and statistically, they're better than Bama. Their defense isn't quite as good, but they're a better offense than Bama, pretty significantly, yardage-wise. And I think the main argument would be I think Bama would beat TCU in a game, is mainly the argument you would have to make. It's just like an eye test thing. But then when you go to other teams out there, you're just like, why is the eye test? I just don't understand it. But it is what it is, I guess.
Yeah, that one frustrates me too, because they're basically saying if Alabama, if TCU goes 13-0, a one-loss Bama, I guess it would make sense because they'd win the SEC. But I still think an undefeated Power 5 champ should be ahead of any non-undefeated team, period.
I agree. And I do think that it would end up that way.
Yeah.
I think. They're going to have a hard time passing Bama until then, though, because Bama's playing LSU and Ole Miss still, 10-11. TCU still has, then one of Georgia or Tennessee. So they're going to play three of the current top 11 if they win out to get there. TCU is going to play probably a rematch with Kansas State in the Big 12 championship, most likely. They still have Texas, who also got ranked, though. That'd be it, though, for their ranked games they have left. Either Kansas State or Oklahoma State are the most likely, even though Oklahoma State seems.
So as it stands, I don't see them jumping Bama.
That kind of does make it seem like it'd be impossible to jump Bama, doesn't it? Oh, that's stupid.
Yeah. Is Texas the only 3-loss ranked team?
Yes.
Okay. I was going to get a little more upset about this, but I was expecting Maryland to be ranked. They only have 2 losses, and they have a pretty solid offense, and Texas had 3 losses. They don't really have any great wins, but their losses are all good, pretty much.
Texas Tech is not a good loss.
Oh, that one was in overtime, right? It was like really close.
Yeah, Maryland's Maryland lost by 7 to Michigan, which I think is pretty equal to losing by 1 to Bama.
Yeah.
That was both were. I think actually Maryland went to Michigan, so that was at Michigan.
Mm-hmm.
And Texas lost at home to Bama. I mean, you think that the committee themselves says that Michigan's better than Bama, so that makes a little sense that they'd be behind. They have less losses. Their other loss was by 2 points to Purdue.
Mm-hmm.
And Texas lost in overtime to Texas Tech, which is a pretty similar team to Purdue. But then Texas has that third loss.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, they're all close losses. I guess I get their logic, but yeah, I was expecting Maryland. I was expecting Maryland to be ranked, and I did not think a 3-loss team would be up there.
Maryland's eye test, they have a lot of close wins against not great teams too.
Yeah,
like this has been blowing people's doors off that aren't. I don't know. It's strange. Texas being there, it definitely caught my eye. But again, it's the Bama effect. Like they respect Bama more than anything. It's really annoying. Like it's gonna, like I said before, sometimes it sounds like sour grapes. But just go look at the history. Go look at the only 1-loss team who didn't have a win against a top 10 team and no conference championship to make the playoff. And basically everything you can make the playoff and be the only one to do it. It's them. They've done it. It's annoying. It's really annoying. They just get the benefit of the doubt no matter what, and thusly all their opponents get the benefit of the doubt. Yeah, the LSU one really just irks me because it's pretty clear that you're right. You're right about the Ole Miss part, that they wanted to put them ahead of Ole Miss because they just beat them down. But they have 2 losses and Ole Miss has 1. And I'm going to stare at everybody because I've heard this on the radio from some local people before too, who kind of said the same thing because they're behind them, and because LSU is behind Ole Miss significantly in the coaches and AP polls.
Yeah.
Is that they're like, well, we just saw who played, we know who's better. Well, then don't lose 2 games. No, we don't know that. We don't know that.
Yeah, that's what it. None of it. The only thing that made sense, I thought. I mean, actually, none of it made sense. Never mind. None of the poll made sense. Period.
It's what they do. It's so funny because when the first couple years, now this could be biased because Ohio State kind of benefited from the way they do it. I actually liked their rankings. I thought it was great, and the AP is sort of, the coaches still do their own fucking thing, and it's terrible. But the AP has sort of molded themselves like that, where they don't fall into poll inertia as much. They still do. But it's not as bad. We're like, well, you were ranked here and you won, therefore you cannot be passed by somebody behind you.
Yeah.
It's always been just stupid to me. And I appreciated the way they worked. And they were usually able to explain. It was something you could easily defend and point to this. This is reason why X team. Ohio State made it over Penn State because Penn State had 2 losses, which everybody seems to forget. They're like, oh, they don't make it because they lost 49-10 to Michigan. No, they didn't make it because they also lost to Pitt that year. So they had more losses. They flat out, they just had more losses. And Ohio State had beaten 3 teams that finished in the top 10 that year. Besides, and then their only loss was to Penn State.
And they have said you go to those are tiebreakers, head-to-head matchup and conference champions. And they go to the tiebreakers if it's comparable resumes. Well, they had 2 losses, so it wasn't comparable.
And one was a blowout, 49-10. But anyway, but the point being, you could defend what they were doing. And then 2017 happened, where some people thought we got screwed. Now, we had the 2 losses that year, and Bama got in over us. But I thought it was Wisconsin who got screwed because they were ahead of Bama going into the conference championship. Bama sat at home. They had to play Ohio State. Wisconsin lost. Somehow Bama gets to pass them because without even playing.
They jumped the team. And they had the same losses, right? Was Wisconsin undefeated?
They were undefeated going into that game. They were like one of the only undefeated, I think maybe the only undefeated team in the country at that point. Or maybe there was another one. Maybe Clemson was or something.
Have to play us, get beat, and I don't even think it was that.
It was like
a beat.
It was like 13. It was like a 13-point game. Because remember, JT had the bad knee coming into that game.
Because I thought if we kill them, we're going to make it, just like 14, and we didn't.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, you're right. They're 12-1, and Bama benefits from sitting at home and not having to play a game. That's like horseshit. Yeah,
It was stupid, and that's when I started to like lose it. And then it was like it's just gotten progressively worse. Where they're just week to week when they try to. I didn't watch it this week, but I heard from Jay. The Haas did text me during it some of their reasoning they were trying to put out there, and it's just like, what are you? Like it's just them. They move whatever it is. Some weeks it's the eye test. Some weeks it's more complete team. Some weeks it's resume that like who have you beat? Like it doesn't seem to ever compare. And you watched. Explain what was going on with when TCU and Alabama was brought up.
yeah. So, well, the first thing that led him to that was he wanted to know why Georgia was ahead of us, and he kind of stumbled over words a little bit, or why we were ahead of Georgia. Sorry, and his main thing was our explosive offense. And then he was like, okay, speaking of explosive offenses, TCU is one of those teams with an explosive offense. So why is Alabama ahead of TCU? Then his explanation was Bama is a more complete team. Well, okay, that can be true, but how can you possibly say Tennessee's more of a complete team? It's like they're using the resume for Tennessee for an argument over us because they beat Bama, but then they're using a completely different criteria to put Alabama over TCU. It's consistently inconsistent is the best way to put them.
Right. We did this because we want them. And I think a lot of it is just, well, we think Team A would beat Team B. And I'm like, that's great earlier in the season. Once you start having a resume, it doesn't matter. Just tell me who's done more. That's who should be in. I don't really give a shit how many 5-star recruits or NFL players you have. Bama has looked they've looked like a more like a 15 to 25 type team than a top 5 team this year.
Yep. But they're Alabama, so they get the benefit of the doubt. This is why I'm pretty pumped about this 12-team playoff. I haven't looked at the exact structure of it, but I'm pretty sure is it going to be guaranteed? It sounds like it. If you're a Power 5 conference, but you have to win X amount of games, I think.
No, it's just the top 6 conference champions.
That's what it is.
As long as they're all top 25, I think. Actually, it may not even be that. I think they put like no qualifiers on it.
No, you're right. That's what it is. Top 6 conference champs. So if like we this year be a perfect example. Let's say somehow Illinois doesn't win the West, and we play like a freaking 8-4 Purdue or something, or Wisconsin, yeah. And then like Cincinnati or like Tulane or whoever's up there ranked right now wins their conference, they would get in over Purdue.
Yeah. But we would probably all be in. I mean,
we would be eligible for an at-large bid, but I'm saying it takes less of their bullshit. It takes their bullshit out of it, and it just says, okay, these 6 teams make it, period, and then they pick the other 6, I think, right?
That's going to be a whole nother level of bullshit when that starts happening.
Yeah.
I do think when it goes to 12, we're going to be split between networks, and that way a lot of the bias of leaning towards the teams that ESPN currently has, mainly ACC and the SEC, which if you look at these rankings, both were treated pretty favorably.
Yeah. How many ACC teams were there? There was like 6.
5, but it's they're almost like the exact same spots that they are in the other polls, in the AP polls. Carolina 17 in both. NC State, Syracuse, Wake are 20 through 22 in both, in different orders, but they're in the same spots pretty much. And then Clemson is higher, obviously, though, in the CFP. So Clemson ahead of Michigan is another one we can talk about there, 4 and 5. Interesting.
That would surprise me a little bit because, again, he referenced us coming back and beating Penn State is one of the reasons we're ahead of Georgia, but Michigan pounded Penn State, and Clemson, all of their wins are starting to look a little worse. Syracuse just lost to Notre Dame. I mean,
I crushed by Louisville.
Yeah. So I was a little surprised about that. I mean, I wasn't shocked, but I think Michigan clearly deserves to be number 4 right now.
I agree. I mean, Statistically, they're definitely better than Clemson. Eye test, they're definitely better than Clemson. Resume, they're not because they played such a shit out of conference schedule, and
Yeah.
the Big Ten is pretty down. But they're gonna get. They got the win against Penn State. They play Illinois the week before they play us, so they'll definitely pass Clemson before the end of the season if that happens. But when Clemson loses Notre Dame this week, it'll be a moot point.
It could.
So I'll ask you now, instead of on our gambling podcast, now that you've seen the rankings, where do you think, what are your thoughts on what the Final Four end up being? You got to take what they're going for now. I think 2 SEC teams is almost a lock at this point.
Oh yeah, I haven't thought that much about it yet, but I feel like the only way it won't be 2 SEC teams is if Tennessee runs the table and Clemson and TCU both somehow go undefeated, which is not going to happen, I feel like.
I agree.
But my gut here, I think Georgia is going to beat Tennessee. It'll be a close game. And then winner of Alabama, Georgia's in, and Tennessee's probably going to sneak in, even though they're not going to freaking play in the last week of the season. So I'm guessing it'll be, if all that happens, we'll be number one if we win out, because the champ will have one loss. So it'll probably be us one in my scenario. I'm guessing Bama's going to win just because it's freaking Bama. Bama 2. Although their schedule's brutal.
It is.
But I'm still not betting against Bama. Us 1, Bama 2. They're not going to put a rematch in the SEC. So I'll still put Clemson 3 and then Tennessee 4. So we're going to play Tennessee in that opening week. But
I think that would be the dream for the networks. I think Tennessee, Ohio State, although I'm less confident about us, I think the door is open. I was thinking of a scenario for the loser of our game with Michigan that isn't too out of control, but Notre Dame needs to win some games for us. They need to beat Clemson and USC. And then that caused havoc because the Pac-12 can end up with 2-loss champion pretty easily if that happens.
Yeah.
If Notre Dame can beat USC, Clemson having.
I've been thinking about that too. We would have to be number 1, I feel like, going into that last week, which means Tennessee'd have to lose. Then Georgia's not going to lose after this game, right?
No. Oh, no, they got nothing after this game. Yeah.
So, well, I guess we won't be number 1 then.
No, winner of this game this weekend, Tennessee and Georgia.
No, I know. I'm saying, is there a way that we could be 1 going into the scum game? But I don't think that there really isn't a possibility. So it'll probably be 2 versus 3, most likely, almost any way you slice it, assuming we both went out. I mean, they got Illinois, but so then.
Or 2 versus 4.
Yeah.
He's still ahead.
They do, but I think Michigan would jump them after beating Illinois.
Maybe. Depends on how bad it is.
Yeah. So
for sure if they beat us, but
yeah. I guess just real quick, you'd have to say the only way we can get in with losing to them, I think, is if only one SEC team makes it, right?
No, I think a 2-2 scenario is on the table. But
so you're saying, obviously, so SEC winner, Georgia, Tennessee loser, Big Ten champ. And,
I think it would have to be both Tennessee and Georgia making it, with whoever winning that game beating Bama. That knocks Bama out. The ND has to beat Clemson. Now, the big thing would be, would they take us over the conference champion Clemson? With these rankings, I maybe don't think that's possible now, with them being 4 already. I thought they'd be 6, to be honest. But they'd have lost to ND, we'd have beat ND, and that would be a tiebreaker. They'd have the conference championship, which would be a tiebreaker. But if you look at the overall completeness and eye test and stuff, we're the better team. Now, that's assuming we lose a close game to Michigan and don't get our goal blown off. But I think that's a scenario we get in over them, and then Michigan's in, and we're in.
What about a one-loss Big 12 champ, though? And we're kind of forgetting about the Pac-12. USC.
Well, the only team that can be a one-loss Big 12 champ is TCU. So TCU would have to.
Every other team has 2 losses?
Yeah.
Holy crap, I didn't realize that.
Lost to Tulane and is the only other one loss in the conference. Only other team has one loss in the conference. And they lost to Tulane in the non-conference.
But we basically just need TCU to lose.
Yeah.
I mean, Clemson could lose to freaking North Carolina in the title game.
And Carolina's a one-loss team, but Notre Dame beat them too.
Yeah.
Notre Dame's the de facto champion, and we end up with that. If Notre Dame wins out, I think it makes that scenario. But which is not likely at all that they win out. But
yeah. But I mean, if they beat Clemson, they're going to be ranked 100% next week. So yeah, I don't know. I mean, it's definitely possible if we beat Michigan in a close game. I don't think they can make it simply because of their out of conference schedule, and that would be fitting that screws them because it's complete bullshit that they had those 3 teams they played.
It is. All right. Well, yeah. So yeah, five SEC teams in the top 11. Clearly, they're aiming to get 2 SEC teams in, pretty much no matter what goes down. Pac-12's kind of screwed, it looks like, from this, even though they have 4 teams in the top 14, but it's all 8 through 14. Yeah, Big Ten's looking good for whoever wins Ohio State or Michigan. Yeah, so I'm going to go Tennessee, Ohio State. I'm going to say I think TCU does run the table, though. TCU, and then I'll say Georgia gets in still, because I think there does end up being a 2-loss team winning the Pac-12, whoever it is. Maybe one loss USC could sneak in though. If they,
I was wondering, like, would they get in over us if we were 11-1 with a close loss to Michigan? I'm thinking they would. But,
yeah, they probably would, because they beaten Notre Dame and beaten Oregon and beaten UCLA to finish out the year. Tough life. Got to go undefeated every year, unless your name is Alabama. All right, well, that'll do for this week's reaction to the CFP. We may do this every week. I don't know. Probably not every week because it's inconsequential more until we get to the last week. But it's interesting to see where they started. And, of course, the committee just leaves us shaking our head like always. What are you doing? All right, we'll get our gambling podcast out soon, though, too. Like us, subscribe, follow us on Twitter, @ViewFromCDeck, and we will see you guys next time.
Hey, guys. Whoa, big gulps, huh? All right. Well, see you later.
A rich man's world.